Now that you know how to change the settings in your editor, you're probably wondering which ones are worth changing. As you might expect, Sublime Text ships with a reasonable set of default settings, but some of its best settings are turned off by default because they might produce unexpected behavior for new users. When you have time, I suggest you look through this whole list of default settings and read the comments for each one and decide if you'd like to change it. But for now, I'll make a few suggestions. First of all, I'll get rid of this line number setting because it's already turned on by default. For each of these settings, feel free to disagree with me. They call them preferences for a reason. The first thing I'll suggest you turn on is bold folder labels. If I switch back to my main project window, you can see the folders are now shown in bold, and that helps them stand out from the rest of the files in the sidebar. Next, I like ensure new line at end of file on save. This makes sure that even if you delete the last empty line in a file, when you save it, Sublime Text will create it again. Version control systems like Git encourage you to always end a file with a new line character. This ensures that if you want to add new content to the end of the file, on line 6 here, you can do it without modifying line 5, and it keeps the change history in the file a little bit tidier. Next, I like to highlight the current line. You can see that as soon as I save this file. Some people find this annoying. I find it a useful visual aid to spot my cursor. Speaking of highlighting things, we can also highlight modified tabs. And now you're probably used to this close button, this X turning into a circle when a tab is modified. But now that I've added this setting, when I modify a file, its title also turns orange, and it makes it that much easier to spot in a long list of tabs. Sublime Text also lets you create rulers, which are vertical lines that serve as guides for certain line lengths. A line length of 80 is a good maximum to strive for, and if I switch back, you can see I now have a vertical line here to remind me when I hit 80 characters. This number is in square brackets because you can have multiple rulers if you want to, just like this. We can add a bit more information to the status bar of our window with show encoding and show line endings. Not only is it useful to see these two pieces of information at the bottom of the window, but they also provide nice clickable areas for commands related to these settings. In the previous video, I showed you how to set your indentation settings for a given project. Well, you probably have preferences for these for yourself that you'll want to set globally. In my case, I like a tab size of 2 spaces. This translate tabs to spaces setting ensures that you can still type tab at the start of the line, but it will now insert spaces instead. If I save my changes, you can see my tab size of 2 has taken effect. And if I create a new line, you can see, unlike all the other lines that I've created in this file so far, it's indented it with 2 spaces instead of a tab. By default, Sublime Text shows these white space characters inside selected text. That's one of the settings you can control if you want to. Here's one that I pretty much require all of my collaborators to use. Trim trailing white space on save, true. It is all too easy to add extra white space to the end of a line and forget you've done it. With this setting turned on, when I save my file, it trims any such white space from the file. Once again, if you're using version control, this is one of those settings that really avoids unnecessary changes creeping into your file and cluttering up your version history. And last but not least, save on focus lost. This one is a bit controversial. It tells Sublime Text to auto-save any file when you switch to another application. Let's say I make a change to this file, and at this point, I haven't saved that change. Now, I don't know about you, but this happens to me all the time. I forget to hit Command-S or Control-S on Windows to save the file, and I switch to my browser, and I spend a couple of seconds wondering why my change isn't visible there. And then I remember that I probably haven't saved the file, and I come back and I save it, and that fixes the problem. These wasted seconds really add up in a day, and having Sublime Text auto-save your files for you will save you all of that time. With this setting turned on, if I switch to my browser or even just switch to another tab, that file automatically gets saved, so I'll never be left wondering why my changes aren't visible. I think instinctively coders are afraid of autosave features like this because they're afraid they might type something wrong and then lose the correct code that they typed over. But this autosave feature doesn't get rid of your undo history. I can still hit Command-Z or Control-Z in Windows to undo that change and save the file again. Really, I think you'll be surprised how quickly you get used to this behavior once you turn it on. But once again, feel free to disagree with me. These are your preferences after all.